Hey Justin, how are you?
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
And we've got Sterling now.
Yep. How you doing, Justin?
Yeah, good. It's good to see you guys again. So this year, let's talk about more of the production side.
Okay.
3D printing.
Yep.
Kind of the back end stuff. So,
Okay.
I mean, I'll let you start. I was talking to Sterling about kind of getting a progression of where the 3D printing started to make those original minis and kind of the progression to the machines and technology you have now without going into too many specifics.
So Sterling is now our full-time in-house engineer.
Oh,
so
cool.
I'll start talking about the beginning, and then I'll pass it over to him because he joined us, a little bit later on.
Nice.
Okay, so in the beginning, 3D printing, we would outsource to a company in Germany, as they were the only ones who had the technology to be able to print the masters that we needed to a high enough fidelity. And there was a lot of pain points there because we were working again with a company that didn't speak English as its first language.
Right.
And an eccentric but very caring owner, sounds familiar, right? Who was not always around. And there were times where I would send these very angry, very upset, long emails translated in both German and English to every single email I could find on their website. And I get panicked responses back in German because these guys who were working there answering the emails had no idea what their boss had promised, or even that they had a client in the States.
Okay.
So that was a very early frustration point. And then the first 3D printer that we purchased, so some of the information I give you I'll be comfortable sharing, some of it not.
Okay.
So what we're working with currently is all proprietary. We're signed up, we can't talk about it.
That makes
But
sense.
the older stuff I can tell you about.
Okay, cool.
So the first machine that I got was from 3D Systems. Of course now the particular name of it escapes me, but it's their smallest DLP printer.
Okay.
And when I pass it over to Sterling, he'll tell you how DLP printing works. Instead, I'll tell you about our failures trying to work with other types of technology, which is FDM, which is what MakerBot makes.
Okay.
And FDM printing is essentially a hot glue gun on 3 axes. And there's so many companies that make this style printer, and it just doesn't work for miniatures.
Right, because the quality isn't quite enough, and the distance between layerings is visible enough.
Yeah, and the nozzle is and here's what we'll get into when you speak to Sterling, the XY resolution matters a tremendous amount, not just the layer height. When people talk 3D printing, especially the way they market it online, it's always about what's your layer height. They'll say, this prints at 100 microns, or 50 microns, at 25 microns. And that's just the layers as this thing is built. It's not necessarily even addressing the fidelity of the edge quality that you're talking about. And with a FDM style printing, it's very analog. So if that nozzle happened to get a little bit messed up, as the material's coming through it, you'll start to see those patterned issues on every single layer as it continues to build your part. The next printer I got was a Form 2. I was pretty excited about it. And it ended up for us just not really being all that useful.
Why not?
So the Form 2 is an SLA type printer. And the way that works is by having a laser cure, like a photosensitive resin, from the bottom.
Right.
And that means that it sort of has a pretty aggressive time, because it's the earlier machines were just made with the same lasers that read CD players.
Oh, wow.
Because it's cheap and accessible, right?
Right.
So this laser would just trace basically a pattern of an image on the... you'd have a tray.
It'll build in reverse.
Yeah,
and then
it builds upside down.
And then it pulls it up from a bath. Yeah. I've seen it.
And between the materials, it was good for doing larger stuff and prototyping, but again, I wanted to have something as good as that German company was providing me.
Gotcha, on a much larger...
Right, and that was on the jewelry side of the market.
Ah, I see.
Yeah. And he actually admitted to me many years later that the reason his machine was so good is because he went in and physically moved the projector, which is showing basically the negative of each slice of the image, closer to the platform and refocused it. So he was doing something that the company didn't want him to do, had no idea he was doing, but providing as a service sometimes to a few clients.
Right,
It's just and then I finally was able to chase down the company that he was working with, and they're the most expensive in the range. It's a company called Envision Tech. Their printers look kind of old, but they're still like the best, and they have DLP printing. And at this point, once we had a machine in house that could successfully be doing the mastering that we needed after the Kickstarter, I thought, okay, well, we have a machine that can do tiny things. We can finally master. It would be great to have a larger machine that we could do actual prototyping on. So that way that after we sculpt something digitally, we had an easier time printing it out to review, to make changes before either returning to the sculpt or having it move on to hard plastic engineering. And at that point, I invested in their large format printer.
Okay.
And while I was experimenting, I was able to fit 50, what model was it? 50.
It was the Twilight Knight that we started with?
Initially, I think it was...
Oh, the Architect you started with.
Yeah, and there's like 50 Architect bodies onto a single platform, like no accessories or anything, and printed out. And I was looking at them and I was thinking, like, these are pretty good. Like, if this thing could do this consistently, that could be like that could be like photo resin production we're talking about. You know, clearly not enough to do production for a full board game run, but at least something to help supplement our resin, which has always never been enough for the fans.
Okay.
So, you know, I took a gamble and I talked the company into getting me several more of these machines. And at that point, that's when Sterling joined me and started to take over these responsibilities. So he can tell you kind of like from that point on, like how we've evolved and how we use the machines on a day-to-day basis.
Cool. Yeah, because that's when, that's right around the time we saw all the photoresin minis on the store.
Yeah, we worked on those for a year before we started the release.
Because weren't you like cleaning them by hand before shipping them out? And the photoresin minis.
We still clean them by hand.
That's awesome.
He'll take you through the whole process.
Yeah, go for it.
So pretty much from the start to the finish of the photoresin run is the advantage of having those 3D printers is that we can get something from our artists, and then once Adam is happy with the sculpt, we can prototype printing it. And you can have a sculpt as close to the screen as you want, or exactly at scale as it will be showing up for the customer. But until you see it on the table, you really don't understand how it's going to look. So being able to
is huge.
Yeah. So sometimes we'd run just prototype after prototype with tiny little changes until we just like honed it in.
What did we do the most prototypes on?
I know the female Death High Preacher.
Yeah.
We probably did 8 or so. And just like each one was a tiny bit different.
And are you doing that in a bigger version just to see the details, or are you
we did one bigger version of her, but mainly we would do 1 for 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that would be kind of the start. And once we hone it in, everything, that's when we have to go and find the best way to split it. Because I think a lot of people have misconceptions about 3D printers that you just hit a button and all of a sudden after 5 hours your thing appears.
I wish.
I wish it were that easy.
Yeah, it's kind of the old person feel of romanticizing new technology.
Yeah.
How is it making everything easier and just push a button you get a thing?
Right.
Where it's not that at all.
It's a completely different process with its own rules.
Yeah.
So once we're happy with the model and we know this is one that we're going to be producing, we have to go into the process of getting it split. Very similar to how resin or plastic works, but due to the technology, you have a lot more freedom you can have these like crazy complicated parts, and you have to be able to split them and then support them because, like I said, it doesn't just come out of nowhere. They have to be anchored to the base essentially. So that's a whole process, and we have to figure out, you know, how many pieces do we want versus like how many supports do we want going into the model. So we have to reach a happy medium there.
Right.
And then once that happens, we can just, like Adam said, put together a platform with a bunch of models on it and
just make as many as you need to. Cool.
And then we have a lot of post-processing that we do to get because it comes out of a bath, so it's all
right. You gotta do the cleanup and make sure it's cured right and everything.
And we have our own method of doing that. So once that's done, they're pretty much ready to go. We just have to bag them up.
Do you remember how many different like chemical solutions we tried before settling on our process now?
Yeah, we had our initial process, but then something like just was weird with it.
Yeah.
Was it just the resin that was recommended from the manufacturer?
So when you clean photo resin, and this is the same thing like Formlabs will have on their website, you clean them with isopropyl alcohol, the higher the better as far as its like purity. So we would order in cases of isopropyl alcohol and have sonic baths to clean these things in. And then all of a sudden, started getting this like white residue.
It's just like powder almost.
So
yeah,
builds
that's
up
actually
in
something
those
that
models.
people have talked about the very first, like the Tickle Tattoo part.
Yeah,
there was
that
a
was-
little bit on some of
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's-
We just couldn't get it off for the life of us.
Yeah.
And we hadn't really changed the process, so we weren't no idea what was going on. So we ran through just a gauntlet of all these different chemicals, just trying to find something that worked. And I think
Totally safe.
Yeah. But I think you were like scouring the forums, and somehow we stumbled upon what we're using right now, and it's
Anna
been working.
found it.
Anna
Anna
found
found
it.
it,
So that's kind of what we've been sticking with for the past year and a half or so.
It's, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong,
Sure.
but it's a material that was used to clean machines that make food.
Yeah.
So
Or-
just like
Wait, no, because I think we were.
That's what we're not using.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
We tried that and it didn't work quite
Okay.
as well as what we're using right now. But so that's kind of the start to finish with it. But I think my favorite thing about using it, 3D printing as a technology, is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, in that we can have something go from Adam's idea to it sculpted, and then you have it in your hand in a week. If you really want to push
Including the
things
sculpting
forward.
time.
Yeah.
wow.
And the sculptors will get down, sculpt it up, and then split it and then support it.
Well, all the
And
different aspects, you've kind of honed it in to where once it gets, at least the basic idea gets approved by you and sent over to the sculptors, I've talked to them and they collaborate so well to get everything done.
Yeah.
And then once it gets out, then you guys know exactly what to do on the 3D printing side to get it done, and then tweaks, like you said, until you know exactly what the master looks like. And then from there, where does it go?
Well, let's back up because
Okay.
we glossed over like one of the
Wait.
biggest steps,
Okay.
which is splitting the models.
Yeah.
And we use the same software that you use to engineer parts for hard plastic molds to engineer the parts for our 3D printer.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a crazy step. Like you can't really do these sort of cuts and make sure that everything's going to work in ZBrush. It might drive you crazy.
Oh,
you
yeah,
can do cuts in ZBrush, but
It's just not designed for
No,
it
it's
in the
not
same
designed
way
for
the
it.
software
Yeah,
we uses. So, yeah, and that's. I guess I did kind of gloss over it, but that does become a very big part of it, because if like you'll notice supports on the models. We don't remove all the supports from the models because we expect the customer to clean it up in their own way and really hone it in. But if we didn't remove the arms, like say that there was a character, I don't know what a good example. Well, really,
talk about Sci-Fi Urza since we have her
Oh
here.
yeah, Sci-Fi Urza. That's the one we just did, because she has those huge loops and her cape and everything, and she's a very layered model. So if we just kept her all as one, there would be supports running all throughout her body, like just into like big flat areas like her thigh, or her chest or her back. So you need to know, okay, like if there's a big overhang over something else, that arm will have to come off.
Okay.
And so over time, you kind of learn how the 3D printer will deal with it and create supports and say, okay, there's definitely going to be supports here, definitely going to be supports here.
Right, because based on what you've seen in the past, you get a way better idea.
And then another big thing is positioning it on the 3D printer. That was one thing we were messing around a lot with. It was like, is it better to do these upside down? Should we do it right side up? Like, how should we position the face so that it has the most detail?
Most detail comes in the height. But then depending on the model, like if you go for full height, you could end up needing to create a lot of unnecessary supports, like into the back of the hair, or something like that.
That's
That
why
makes sense.
you'll almost always see the heads taken off, because especially because we're running the Death High primarily right now, and generally the ladies have their hair going out behind them, and that would all just shoot supports down to the back if they have the cape on. So the heads are almost always going to come off. There are a few exceptions if they have really short hair. It's not as necessary, but.
Well,
Or if their hair happens to just be layered all over them.
Yeah.
Which is similar to like plastic or resin casting, right?
Right.
One of the big differences, and Sci-Fi Urza is a great example of this, is that she has a big cloak on, and the cloak is coming down, and there's a tremendous like undercut behind the cloak in her body.
Right.
And that's not possible in plastic production. It's not possible in resin production. And if you made a silicone mold like that, like removing the part would be excessively difficult and just lead to the mold being ripped and not usable very fast. It's incredibly unproduction friendly. But the technology, like, it's a give and take. So that's an advantage. But then there's other disadvantages too.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Because you've probably noticed on models, like certain parts have to be drafted in order to come out of the injection molding, which you don't have to worry about with 3D printing. That's one of the massive upgrades over it, because you can just basically print it as is after you chop the arms off and chop.
Right, as long as like you said, as long as the supports are where they need to be. And then, so for something like a head, would you just print the head separate as its own thing?
Generally, yeah. That's another thing we had to mess around a lot. We actually started trying to do our own custom supports. That's something that we've kind of been looking into.
And then the software lets you just put them in where you need them?
Pretty much,
yeah. Cool. That's awesome.
Tell Justin what it's like to actually work with the machines every morning, like what has to happen physically.
Sure, yeah. Dude, I can just go through.
Yeah, and here we can come this way a little bit too. Yeah, it's not super structured.
So I'll just go through a morning for me while running production.
Yeah,
okay, so I'll walk in, I'll have my Monster Energy in hand, set it down on my desk, do a stretch, and then walk over to all the machines. Lift their hoods up. They all have these
they're
big, huge hoods on them, so UV light doesn't come in.
Right.
Because of the technology uses UV.
Because if there was any light bleed, that would cure.
Oh yeah.
It's happened before. I left one open and the morning sun was streaming in, and it just started curing the top of it. So there's just this plate of resin. I was like, oh god, I gotta go take care of that.
Wow, that's fast too.
It
needs to be because it's printing. Like, how quick is a print?
Well, each layer is probably each one is probably 2,000 layers. It's
okay, and then just how much? What?
And then
generally each second.
Yeah, because each layer. Gosh, I actually can't say for sure. But it goes up and down probably 3 or 4 times a minute.
We have them tuned, so we're basically getting about 9 millimeters an hour in height.
Yeah.
Okay. But the base plate takes longer because it needs to bake in.
Okay.
And then, the machine, it's not just the amount of time that the machine has got the light on and it's curing a layer, it's also the amount of time that it comes up.
Yeah.
Lets the material flow back over.
Oh, that makes
and then
sense.
comes back down.
Yeah.
And when it comes up and when it comes down, it's also slower. And when you're doing the base plate, because you really want it to be nice and secure, the machines, do all of them? Are all of them set up to tilt, or just?
I know for sure 2 are. I think they all are actually.
The machine physically tilts so that base plate that we baked on super hard, that everything's then built on, is on nice and tight. And by tilting it, we do less damage to the basement that everything is sitting in, because those are disposables. And if you build a whole bunch of swords, and as they're being built, they're basically just stabbing this thing over and over again. Oh. The next print you do, you'll have to deal with this area on the basement that is now not getting the light purity at the same amount. So we went through a tremendous amount of tuning and experimenting to try to get it so we're being as gentle as possible, but still hitting the print fidelity that we wanted.
Yeah. That does become a big part of my job. So I'll walk in, open up all the hoods, and then the platforms actually come off. You unlock them and just pull them straight off the machine. Mm-hmm. So I'll pull off a platform of 50 models and then set it to drain, because it has all this liquid resin in it still. And after that happens, I literally take a spatula, a metal spatula, and
just get the base plate off.
Jam it underneath and try to get it all the way around, so you get this base plate with everything on it. Do that for all the machines, and then I'll take them back and start doing the cleaning process. So while that's going on, I have to individually check each machine. We get a scraper and check the basement, which has all the resin in it. Make sure that there are no holes in the plastic, make sure that there's nothing stuck to the bottom, basically just make sure they're all ready to go.
Right.
And a lot of the time, if something happens, we'll have to drain everything, get it all cleaned up, get ready to go. So
what are the common problems that would happen if it's not cleaned properly?
if it's not cleaned properly, if there's something in there, because it constantly pushes down and gets like really, really close to the bottom. If there's like a head or something, it could push it right through the basement, which would do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
So
Most commonly, it would be like a tiny shrapnel off a piece of support that happened while we're cleaning, and then that'll create like a divot in the basement, which is pretty much the same as like it being worn out. You just have this spot. It's now a dead spot. You have to start building around it.
So that's probably the main problem, and that's why when we drain the resin, we'll have a paint filter, and that'll catch everything, like all these little pieces and stuff.
Oh, that's smart.
Another issue that can happen is just as this part of the machine gets really old, like Adam was saying earlier, the light quality will decrease because it kind of gets cloudy.
Yeah.
So I have to check for that, make sure that nothing too serious is going on. But once it's all good, I'll clean the platforms where things are built, put it all back on the machine, make sure it's good to go, and then send more 3D print jobs to it.
Cool. And then you just pretty much run them 24/7?
Not 24/7, because we do need a person to physically remove them if we want to keep them.
I mean, but you would start a run maybe.
We'll start a run during the day, and then before we leave for the night, we'll start another one usually.
And then it starts the process all over again with you checking in, taking them home, taking everything out and cleaning.
We're looking for another member of the team who could be there in the evenings to do like a night job.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But right now, it's just not. Like, the two of us work so hard. Before it was just me on those things.
Yeah.
And now finally Sterling and Eugene's been helping with it too.
Yeah, I was talking to Eugene.
And we've, during times of like high production, we teach other people in the office to just like help us with the very manual parts of it.
That's pretty much going through a day. And then usually what I'll do, if I'm not working on another model or something, for Adam or just for production, that's when I'll create more build jobs, because actually creating the job that these 3D printers run from takes a huge amount of time and an unbelievable amount of computer processing power.
How long did it used to take on the previous machine, the workstation?
I could usually probably do 2 a day, but they would be overlapping each other, and that would sometimes make my computer crash, and I'd lose 5 hours of work.
So it's about 5 hours to build one?
Probably with that old machine, it's probably around 5 hours. Now it's probably down, depending on how extreme the build is, probably 2 or 3 hours.
How much was that new computer of ours?
Right around $11,000.
$11,000.
Wow.
Because we got it has a Xeon processor, I think 128 gigabytes of RAM.
Yeah.
And just it's
I thought we kicked up to the 160.
It might be. I have to check. It's a lot of RAM.
It's just like rendering anything.
Pretty much, because it's
processor
literally
intensive.
It's taking STL files, and then it just chops them into pieces. And that, like, I've crashed my computer so many times. The old one, the new one can pretty much handle it. One time I was like, let's see how far I can push this computer, and I used up literally all the RAM I had on the computer. And
how many cores does that computer have?
I think 24 cores. And then like an NVIDIA Quadro card.
So is it, and this is for doing the runs that are a bunch of models all stacked?
This is actually creating the jobs themselves.
Gotcha, and that's why it's so process intensive. If you're going to do one to test, it's not nearly as much as...
Oh yeah, if I'm just doing a couple models for Adam to check out, it'll take like 15 minutes to create the build job.
Yeah.
But this is where
the ones are like, they're packed so tight, and the software isn't very good. So it's like a real jigsaw puzzle. Being very patient with it.
Yeah, the computer's basically the interpreter to tell the bad software on the machines what to do.
Yeah,
pretty much.
So knowing that and getting that down right is the thing to do.
Yeah, I actually like the terrible software because I got so used to it. The company released a newer software, and I hate using it. It's much more user friendly, but I'm so used to the terrible UI that.
The icons are so small you can barely click on them.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
So when would you do a larger scale? So like a 1/6 or 1/8 or a bust?
That's we'll do those for prototyping mainly. Like some of the stuff you see now at Gencon, we did.
Does that help in terms? How does that help? Like,
well, if we're doing like a new monster or something, we want to, because the monsters obviously are much larger than survivors.
Right.
Well, I think what you're asking is, do we print smaller models at bigger scales?
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Yeah, and no, not really.
Not unless it's for fun.
Oh, okay.
We did, yeah.
But yeah, like if we're doing a larger version of it to actually sell at some point, we'll do it. But like looking at it bigger doesn't help because we want to see what.
Because you know what it's going to be in the end.
Yeah.
All right.
We will mess with scale though sometimes, like
all the time.
Well, yeah,
all
not
the time.
sometimes, all the time.
It's like this like I think it was for the Gigaline, the survivor who has the whip and the leather, who's like the leather queen, which is a pinup that we kind of like brought in as a regular survivor. She's got the braided hair and the mask on. She looked amazing on the screen, and then we printed her, and to me something about the legs looked a little funky, and so we printed her like I think 9 times. With,
that was Eugene took care of that one.
With different, with 2 different leg sizes and then different scales. And like again, like the human perception of the way you look at a miniature is very different than how it looks on the computer. And depending on, I still don't even quite understand it yet, even though I've been doing this for years. It's like a constant evolving challenge. Depending on the model, their pose, and their proportion, it will look very different in person. And like we want to capture the intent of the art as best as we can for gameplay. So we'll have these moments where we're looking at like 9, in this case 9 versions of almost the exact same thing, trying to see which one naturally feels the best to your eye. And they're just like subtle differences. So like making something even 3 millimeters bigger or smaller in some cases will have a tremendous impact on how it feels. And be like, oh my god, now the head seems tiny. That's so weird. We scaled everything. Did you scale everything by 3%? Yeah, I scaled everything by 3%. Like, what the? Like, what?
Yeah, it's the same proportion.
Yeah. The novice we did a lot of that with.
Oh yeah, she was hard. And then one detail that we could sort of mention too is that like this may seem like romantic to people listening to, like the technology and the machines, and the struggle though with working with the machines and keeping them like razor sharp is real. There's 2 things that need to be tuned constantly, which is the light level and then the actual the platform that things get built on. The platform that things get built on doesn't level itself.
Yeah, and it is. You can do it to within 5/1000ths of a millimeter.
Wow.
So I've gotten pretty used to doing it, so I can do it pretty quickly now. But sometimes the platform will come up and like half the build platform is peeling off because it wasn't tight enough. So you have to go through and find out like exactly how tight to make it, because the tolerances on the machines are extremely small. It's 50 microns for each level. So if you want to make sure that everything's like brought in really tight, you have to pay really close attention to that. So
it's a very advanced and very technologically minded process of bringing the platform down onto a piece of paper and then adjusting screws which control the tension on 4 springs.
Oh, lovely.
It's like, and then using a super,
You literally have a tiny flat piece of metal that you stick in and to feel it and be like, oh, this side feels a tiny bit looser, let's tighten it up a little bit.
It's so precise.
And, incredibly precise.
No, that's funny, because all the technology that goes into the projector and all the equipment to figure out exactly how to tell the projector what to do and when. And I'm sure there's just the auto leveling, even on the more traditional filament and extruder printers have a hard time with auto leveling their beds.
Oh yeah. It's anything that requires like focus and precision. Like very often you'll end up just having to have that human part. You just have to. Like even when you're taking photos and stuff, like the auto level on this stupid thing isn't auto focusing. Give me the manual. And you're like, there, got it. It's similar.
So when you're planning plastic production, what part does the 3D printing play in that, or do you still outsource that?
No, we do all the prototyping with the 3D printing.
Okay.
And sometimes even after we get our plastic splits, we'll print up like the split model on a 3D printer and say, okay, let's see how this all goes together. Is this a acceptable build? Like all the pieces fit? Does it look good? And then
just so that when you build it, it feels good.
Right.
As opposed to like like the Phoenix hands, for example, like, oh my god, why? Well, one last thing we should talk about is we have been working with a company to develop a new resin.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and some of the things on the floor here are actually printed in.
Oh wow.
Like right before the show. The Crimson Crocodile up in front is printed. We're calling it, this is Death Resin Gray.
Yeah. I forget exactly what we were calling it, but
Sounds like an evil mastermind's plan. We will cover the world in death resin.
Yeah.
And go on.
Yeah, just because all this technology is so brand new. Basically, like we just continue trying to develop it and get it even better.
Well, and you were saying you pretty much in the industry, the printers you run to prototype and do all this stuff for production are like the best in the world.
As far as I know, yeah. And
Yeah.
like I know a lot about the world of DLP printing at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you've kind of had to, just to get through what you want, especially the Crimson Crocodile. That's a good one to talk about, because the detail on it, with all the different layers, especially on the back, they all seem to go in together, and the undercuts must be really interesting to make from a production standpoint for the printing.
Yeah.
Especially figuring out, as we were talking about earlier, all the different supports for it.
That
How
one,
many-
yeah, we pretty much just print that one as is. I did a few edits on
Yeah,
it,
it was hollowed out.
but yeah.
Gotcha. And so because it prints upside down, you don't have to worry about so many supports on its back.
Right,
It's just
yeah,
all on
it
the
all
other
went
side
to
of
the
the
belly.
tail.
So
and the belly,
that took a while to clean off. But
There's a little bit of like con magic going on there. You know?
yeah, just last minute.
Well, yeah, and it also doesn't have to go into someone's hands, so we're able to
Right.
hide a lot of that stuff underneath it.
yeah.
Makes sense. So did you have to contract out the resin production, or is it something you had to figure out in-house to the formula they ended up going with?
Oh, the new formula? No,
Yeah.
we
We're
worked
working
with we worked with the company to develop it.
Nice.
So they like send us some and we test it and go back and forth.
Yeah.
We're hoping we can move production to it because it seems to have an even greater ability to sort of like diffuse the light. So there's even less build lines than the kind of like peachy stuff that we've been using.
Right.
We
So-
just started using it like 2 weeks ago
Yeah.
or so. So we have to do a lot of fine tuning with it, but it's looking really promising. I'm really excited about it.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So I don't want to take too much more of your time. I'm just going to say thank you. And
Yeah,
it's
my
good to see you
pleasure,
again.
Dustin.
I just
Thanks
wanna-
so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Sterling.
I'm
Yeah,
of course.
It was good to interview somebody from the team too.
Yeah.
Because it's always just the same stuff over and over again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, cool. Thank you so
It's
much.
more than Kingdom Death and just me by far.
Oh, I know. But it's hard because you're like shiny. Like it's like find the rare Pokemon.
Well, I do the, you know, I go into to on mode. It's sort of like the legacy of. At the time when I kickstarted, that was like the thing you did. Like, hey, I'm the person with the dream. Like, here it is. And
Oh,
now
yeah,
it's like
yeah.
part of the branding in a way. If I did it over again, I would have absolutely like hired an actor
And then had them be the
and
face.
just hidden behind it. Oh,
Oh, that's
yeah,
funny.
for sure. I'd still hang around and talk shop, but the pressure would be a little bit less.
Yeah, and it's every year for you guys, and we're kind of done. You don't have to stress.
Okay.
It's every year for you guys, so but it's just here.
Oh yeah.
So it's all the prep and everything, and I don't even want to know what the setup is because when do you guys get here? Like
Tuesday.
Yeah, Tuesday.
Tuesday, and then you just got a couple of days.
We
to
actually
set
sent
up?
an away team a day early this year, just so
Wow.
that they could arrive with the furniture first, which
that's perfect.
they didn't do. Much to our dismay, they decided to not follow the plan, so we ended up waiting for them to deliver the furniture anyway.
Lovely.
Yeah, it was you know a tactical mistake, but we rolled with it. It's not a big deal.
I mean, yeah, you got it all figured out.
It's a
in the
learning
end anyway.
experience.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome.
All right.
All right.
Let's get the
Justin.
mic back.
It was a
Again,
good one.
Thank you.